And we should be live. So, hi everyone, and welcome to this stream by Offensive Security. My name is Siddicky, and I'm a student mentor at OffSec. Today I'll be streaming Bravery, which is part of the DigitalWorld.Local series from VulnHub. For those who are catching this on YouTube, kindly skip to the 20-minute mark, as we like to use this time to let people trickle in and hang out. Sure thing. Let me change the title of the stream. Always great to see people just pouring in. Yeah, a lot of Siren fans. I think maybe she'll be joining us, maybe not. Uh, that's just something we'll have to see. Yeah, the sound is there. I'm just waiting for people to join in. And obviously, if you guys have any questions, normally we do have the office hour, which I think happened a few hours ago. So normally we do have the question answer session there. But yeah, I'll be monitoring the chat just in case the other questions. But yeah, today we'll just be doing uh, this box. And I'm kind of excited for this one because it's been a while since I did one of the Linux machines. I've been kind of focused on Windows these days with AB evasion and everything. But yeah, it's always nice to come back and do one of these boxes. So we're just waiting for people to come in. So I'm going to start in a bit. But yeah. So yeah, there we go. We've changed the title. So hopefully you guys have been following. Siren herself, she's done a couple of these machines. I think the last one you guys did was Torment. So I'm just here checking in today, and I'll be doing Bravery. Obviously, these are Linux machines, but yeah, it's going to be fun. And especially with these old machines, there's always some alternative vectors that we can obviously check out. Yeah, guys, hold on. Once we start, hopefully you guys will enjoy this. But yeah, kind of spent all of my wisdom today during the office hours, so don't really have much to impart on you guys. But yeah, once we start the box, hopefully things are going to pick up. Also, I can just see people are just pouring in, especially, with these, this kind of, it's kind of a niche, right? Cybersecurity, especially pen testing. So compared to other genres, you see like people have millions and millions of, viewers on TikTok and stuff, but especially for this category, it's a small niche that we cater to. But yeah, especially to see so many people just pouring in, that's like really amazing to see that. So how many of you guys are actively enrolled in the Pen 200 course? Oh, the reason I'm just asking, most of the time I do I run into some students from other even servers and stuff. That was just one of the reasons. Obviously, these streams are meant to be if you're uh, planning on ever taking it, or the planning on taking the Pen 200 course, or even just getting your skills and methodology in check. So this is one of the good ways to learn while interacting uh, like live on stream. Especially the way I'm going to be solving this machine is I'm going to take it from the perspective of either I'm trying to do a pen 200 lab machine or even the exam machine. So how I would approach that, that's how I would go about this. Yeah, the Web 200 course is really great. So especially Sharon, she worked on that, and I've taken a look at Web 200 too, especially if you look at the courses. So previously, before the update to the Pen 200 course, you would see with before Active Directory was included, we did cover a lot of things, right? So it was a wide scope. So although we still have obviously web attacks included in Pen 200, but now with the introduction of AD, especially in the exam, you'll notice that a lot of the focus have moved towards Windows machines and how to go about attacking several chains. So the introduction of Web 200 is really great because it primarily focuses on all those web attacks, and especially if you're ever planning on going on taking Web 300, it's a great primer. Like you won't find a better primer for Web 300 other than the Web 200 course. So the length of the stream, I think normally it does go up to 1 hour and a few minutes, but yeah, that depends on the length of the box. This one, I'd say it's going to be around that ballpark. So 1 hour, maybe 20 minutes, something like that. We'll see. So I did have planned to even go about once we're done with the books, like exploring why the vulnerability is there, or even how you would approach it, or even patch it. But obviously, we'll see if you have time in the end. But yeah, I'm here to not only show you the methodology, but I'm more here to show you some neat tricks that I do use in when solving boxes, and I hope it's gonna help you guys too. Of course, that's always the plan, to maybe revisit some techniques that are already there that you guys know of, but applying them here. And yes, all the tools that we'll be using are open source and FOSS, so free and open source. And like I mentioned before, I'd be approaching this with the mindset of the same way I approach an exam. So that's one of the so all the restrictions that are applied in the Pen 200 exam, the OSCP exam, I'll be following those while solving this machine. Yeah, definitely. So this is one of the boxes that is available on VulnHub. So you can always download it and deploy it on your end when you're solving the machine. And I kind of like it when you have it deployed on your own end because that means you can literally send lots of requests without worrying about uh, messing with the network, right? So that's definitely we'll be using that to our advantage today. So usually all of these streams are uploaded on our YouTube channel too, so where you can find those. But yeah, uh, according to Twitch, I think it's going to be there for 14 days, and then we'll also be uploading it on YouTube. Yeah, 4 minutes left before we start. And also on a side note, so I'm not sure how many of you guys have streamed or you've tried streaming. So today I was actually testing out the use of NDIs, so network device interfaces. So that allows me to kind of use two PCs when trying to do the stream. And today I finally managed to, set that up. So I do have my Windows rig, which basically is streaming this whole uh, the main which streaming to Twitch, but the main Kali machine that I'll be using, that's actually not on the Windows machine that is capturing this and sending the stream out. So I was playing around with those, and OBS is really powerful that way. You can do a lot of nice things, especially although VMs should be made easily deployable anywhere. But I have my single setup where I have my Mac and my main setup there. So you adding a second PC is always kind of a hassle. So that just on a side note. So yeah, hopefully let's see how that goes. Up till now it's going really well. So yeah. So you should definitely check out NDI, especially there if you're using like for your recording, if you're using a XLR or dynamic mic, there are other so there are other like output devices like the Wave XLR and something like that, but obviously those cost like you have to make bigger investments. But if you actually use NDI, you can bypass all of those, and it's a cheap, good way of utilizing two PCs at once. If especially it's more useful in streaming and when you want to stream your game, like a game, because when you're gaming, it's really taxing on your PC. So similarly, when we're running VMs, we assign like a good portion of the memory to one VM. So it is taxing on your machine. So that's a good way to manage it. So yeah, we're about to hit the 20-minute mark. So I'm just gonna start the stream now. So let's go. So I have my tmux session ready, and you can see that I have made a folder called Bravery and saved it into the VulnHub folder. But the first thing I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and let's set up our environment we'll be working workspace we'll be working out of. So the first thing I like to do, I like to create at least 5 or 6 windows. Let's create one more. So 6 windows to work out of. And then we have to export the IP variable for the machine. Now, because this is locally hosted, you can go find that out by either running netdiscover, or what I would recommend, going to your router settings and finding the IP of the machine and then setting it to a static IP. That way you won't really have to log into the machine to do all the networking stuff, and you can simply do it from your router. But yeah, so I'm going to set the IP variable to all of my terminals, all of my windows. So let's just go do that. So I'm going to export. So you'll see that the same command was sent to all of my windows. Similarly, what I like to do, I like to set the working directory path. This way, if you ever move out of this current directory, we can quickly refer back and go back to the directory. So I'm just going to set that. And there we go. So the last thing I like to do is I like to open VS Code into my current directory. So yeah, this is already open. I had my zhset config open, but that's fine. So I'm going to send this there. And let's just close this one. So yeah, so you'll see that if we look at so what I basically did was I created a notes folder right here. Let me just set that up real quick. So right now I do have my notes MD right here. So I'm also going to create an enum directory, right? And then I'm hopefully going to open VS Code and it's not going to give me issues. Yeah, this is fine. So now if you come here, you'll see that I have my bare bones. Okay, so it's empty, but that's fine. Let me just quickly grab the template I generally use for when solving machines. So yeah. So basically this is a general template and which we can fill out ourselves as we progress throughout the machine. So let me just give you a quick overlook. Basically it's just going to be, we have the IP address right here. So we'll just enter that. And the rest of the information we can enter as we go on. The second thing you'll see that we have this workspace open. So let's start with an Nmap scan, and I'm going to be saving most of my outputs to my enum directory. That way I can quickly refer to the output when I need it, right? So the first thing we'll do is an Nmap scan of all the ports. So it's going to be nmap dash p dash, and then because we're on a local, the machine is on LAN, we can actually send a lot of requests. So we can go with 10,000 requests, and this is going to speed up the scan exponentially. However, when you're in an environment like Proving Grounds or in the labs or even any other VPN, I would recommend going with 5,000 or less, because that's when usually you see good results and you don't really destroy the network. So yeah, so I'm gonna supply the IP address and then I want to save the output to enum and save it as all ports. So that looks good. I'm gonna just start that and hopefully it should be done in a few seconds. So yeah, as you can see, quite quick, and we got the results. So the next, we'll go visit this output, but let's also start another scan. Now, generally, the next scan I would like to do is using the default scripts and the enumerate versions script from Nmap. Now, for that, in order to make the scan much faster and without increasing the requests sent per minute, because we want it to be accurate, what we can do is we can supply these ports that we found were open, and that way it's going to be much faster. So for that, we can use some awk magic right here. So what we can do, I'll just use all ports, and then I'm going to grep for all open ports, and then I'm going to use awk field separator. We know that we want everything before this dash, so backslash. So I'm going to use that. And then what we want the first field. So I'm going to use print $1. And next we're going to use the resource splitter, right? So output resource splitter. What this is going to do is for Nmap, we want the ports with divided by a comma, right? So this is going to give us the output like so. So now you can see that all these ports, we have them in a format that we can use for Nmap. Additionally, what you could have used was rustscan. So for rustscan, the command is rustscan-a, and then you give the IP address, and then we want the output in greppable format. So we're going to use the G flag right here, and then we can simply give the 10,000 rate so that it's faster. So let's see how long this takes. And I always like to run double scans just in case I do miss a port, right? So you'll see it's similar right here. So now we can do our Nmap scan. So it's going to be nmap-svcv, that's default scripts and default versions. And then we're going to use the aggressive scan. Now, obviously, this is a bit different than specifying the min rate itself, because Nmap has already accounts for all the speed, and it does give accurate results. So we have this. Next, we're going to supply our IP. And then we can specify the folder. So you'll see I use -on. If you use -oa, it's going to give you several formats. But for me, the output into the Nmap format works fine. So I'm just going to give that. I'm going to save it as services. And next, I'm going to give all the ports that I found open. So you'll see this is much faster than scanning for all the open ports. But yeah, while this runs, we can come back to our code workspace. So the good thing about this is right now, once the scan is done, it'll get populated, right? But let's visit all ports. So let's see, we have port 22 open, that's SSH, 53, most likely DNS. But yeah, we have HTTP and 3 instances of HTTP. The other one is HTTPS, and then we also have a proxy running. So this is one thing that we'll take note of, that we might like to start with when we start enumerating or start looking at things in the box. So we do have a web server right here, but generally we also have RPC. We also have SMB open, Samba, and MySQL, also NFS. So I know, so looking at initially when you take a look at so many ports open, it can be daunting at times. However, you need to remember it's much better to have so many vectors that you can try, and so that even if you're stuck at one of them, you can move on to the other one. Trust me, if you only have 22 and 80 open, it's much worse. But yeah, normally if you look at this from the exam perspective, or even look at it from solving a Pen 200 lab machine, normally when you see so many ports open, so there will be rabbit holes. However, it's not going to be that, oh, maybe HTTP is a rabbit hole and then your access is through MySQL. That's not how it's going to be. It's more likely that they chain things. So maybe you have to chain an attack through HTTP, or in this case, it could be that the SMB folder is linked to your HTTP. So maybe there's SMB has a www directory where maybe you can upload some files which will be directly linked to HTTP. But yeah, in this case, even if it's not linked, there are usually hints that build up the whole thing. So that's one thing you have to remember, that you need to see how these services link up. So let's just look at the services scan. And the moment I see so many services, I like to use enum for Linux. So let's just also run that tool while we look at the output. So for enum for Linux, it's going to enumerate the RPC for you. It's going to enumerate SMB for you, and it has several other checks too. So for that tool, I have enum for Linux NG, new generation, but which I recommend using. The old one isn't that good, but obviously the old one is fine too. But this one has, I think, color highlighting and more features where it checks for printers and stuff, which is more related to Windows. But it's always good to use the new generation tools. And the syntax is -A, where you specify the IP. And then we do want to save out the output so that we can view it in our VS Code. So the syntax is similar to Nmap, where we can just specify enum and then enum for Linux. You can call it anything you want, but this looks fine. So while this runs, it already finished. So that's how fast we are on the LAN, right? So let's just look at the services again. So we saw SSH, which really isn't really going to help us in this case. Next thing so we know it's a CentOS box. So at this stage, you can start populating your nodes. We can come back to it later. I like to save all the outputs and then revisit my notes if I'm stuck or I need to, gather my thoughts. So 53, again, not really that interesting. So we have our HTTP right here. So the first one looks like a normal Apache server and also has PHP. And because I did see MySQL open on this box, so that might mean that it might be running some PHP myadmin maybe in the background, because it helps, it makes the whole process of integrating your MySQL with PHP and your web server. It makes life quite easier for that. And then RPC obviously is open, because if you want to interact with the SMB service or the NFS service, you need RPC to be active in order to do that, right? So we have actually two sorts of file sharing here. So SMB, as you guys know, it's primarily used to transfer files from one PC to another, whereas NFS is more of a more of a mount. So you mount the storage and it lives into your it lives right there. So it's all can also be used for file sharing and stuff, but NFS is more shared storage, whereas SMB is primarily used to copy and transfer files, which you'll see how that gets implemented here. So we have SMB open, and then we also have 443. So we would like to quickly check if the web server running on port 80 and 443 is different or the same. So that's one check that we'll have to do. Then we also have HTTP proxy, so which we can also visit to check. The next thing is MySQL. We can quickly check if we can connect to it directly from our host. And then we also have our robots.txt on port 8080. Now, the moment I see CGI bin, I quickly like to check if there's shell shock vulnerability present, or even a more recent vulnerability, the Apache directory traversal. So we can quickly check for those two vulnerabilities if the box is vulnerable to that. But for that, we'll have to check if there are it's either admin or certain scripts available included after CGI bin, which we can quickly check using Ferox Buster. And then that's pretty much it. So we also have NFS. So now let's take a look at our enum for Linux scan, and then we can start formulating on how we would like to approach this box from, like where would we like to start from. So let's take a look. So enum for Linux does give you two options to either save it as a JSON format or a YAML format, or whichever works for you. I actually prefer to look at the output from in the terminal, but you can use whichever one you want. So we can see obviously LDAP isn't present, but the first thing that's interesting, at least to me, is the SMB. So it did check, and it has the latest version of SMB right here. So it's most likely not really vulnerable to an SMB vulnerability because it's using one of the latest versions, but we can quickly check for that too. Then RPC, again, uh, doesn't really bring anything interesting. So SMB does give us different versions. So if you would like to, obviously this shows Windows 6.1, but that's just the way it logs things. But if you would like to check if it's vulnerable, we could have checked using this version. What about users? Because RPC usually allows us to enumerate users, and we can see we already have two users right here. So there's a user called David on the box and user Rick. So because all of this output is saved in text, we can refer to it later, but you could always copy paste this and add it to your notes. But right now I'm more interested in getting on the box, right? So second thing, we could see the Smb shares, and we can see that there are three shares on the box. We have anonymous and secured. So we'd quickly like to check if we have access, writing access or reading access to both of these shares. So that's where I'd primarily like to start, even if there's HTTP running on the box. Like I mentioned, sometimes it's linked. So it could be that the HTTP might give us a password, which we might use to access SMB, but that's highly unlikely. More often than not, it's the other way around. So you want to start with any SMB or NFS storage just to see any quick wins. And then you move on to HTTP, which is most likely having some admin panel that you have to access. But again, this is just a hypothesis, like from experience that I've seen how boxes are made and how they progress. So other than that, that's pretty much it. So you'll notice that NFS, we did not really get any information on NFS, right? So we can actually use Nmap for this. And I'll just show you guys a nice way to search for the Nmap scripting engine scripts that you can use. So if you want to search which scripts are there that we can use against a service, what we can do is we can use locate. So locate with -r. This gives us the regex option. So anything we search will have regex enabled there. So I just want to quickly search for all the NS network scripting engine, Nmap scripting engine. Gonna ending with that and grep for NFS. So you'll see that we have three options that Nmap will run for us. So I think we can either run all of them or you can run a single one. I'm more interested in the show mount to see if we can mount to any network storage there. So what we can do is we can run an Nmap scan and we can specify the script. Now, if you want to run all of them, you're more than welcome to do that. For that, you'll just have to specify that we want to run all the NFS scripts. and then you can just use the IP address, and you'll see that it did check and it found that there is an NFS share that is mountable by us, like all users. So let's just save this output too, right? So I'm going to save that, but I'm not going to specify all of it. I don't want extra information like that. Let's just make it a bit cleaner. So show mount, and then I'm just going to save it to enum, and let's call it mountable shares. So it gave us the same result. So we can quickly check mountable shares, and this here we have that. So we can later add this to our notes. So in order to, I'd say let's quickly see if there's any information here, and then we'll move to SMB. So I think that's a good way to go about it, right? So in order to mount an NFS share, you first need to create a folder that you would like to mount it to. So normally you can go with either a directory uh, in your current working directory, or you can go with any, it doesn't really matter. But before we do that, there's also another way to check for the mount, and that's with the command show mount -e and IP. So that was the way to do with Nmap, but you can also check the mounts and shares available using show mount. But yeah, let's quickly create a directory in our working directory called mkdir nfs, right? And I'll just like to name it this so that in case I do search for any NFS folders, it doesn't really collide with any other folders that I had. So I have this folder created right here. So now we can just mount it. So for that, you'll have to use sudo, and then you'll use mount -v. Let's use v so that it's a bit verbose. -t type. There's several different types. So we know this is NFS, and then you have to give your IP address, the name of the share, which is var nfs share, and that should be it, and the directory you want to mount it to. So let's just say, call it nfs siddicky. So it, let's see, because we tried the verbose option, so that simply showed us that what kind of a version it was, and the client and the target address, right? So now if we go to nfs siddicky, we'll see that we were able to successfully uh, mount it. And I think there's some I did reset the machine, but for some reason it didn't get reset. So what I usually like to do is I like to, if I see an NFS mount, I quickly like to test if there's a no root squash enabled. Basically, what that option does is that it will, if that option is enabled, it allows any user to upload uh, sticky bit or set UID binaries on the machine. So in theory, what you can do is when you log on to the target machine, the permissions are transferred. It reserves the permissions. So if I upload a shell, let's say right now as a root user, if that option is enabled, you can you can use that to get root on the machine. But yeah, for now, I think these ones, the machine didn't get reset. So I was trying a few things. So what we can do is save time. I'll just remove these. Otherwise, we could have reset the machine, which I think I can either reset, but let's see. But yeah, so this is the how you'll find it if you have the, yeah, this is most likely how you find it. So yeah, let's see. So we have a couple of folders right here. So we can either use I think, will this work? Quickly cat, yeah. So because there's so many files right here, obviously for a directory it won't work, but I just use to cat out everything that's we can read right here from. So there's a couple of hints. So it says remember to look around you, enumeration is fun, and then sometimes the answer you seek is right in front of your eyes, and read me first. So let's see what the itinerary has in store for us. So like we saw before, there is a user called David on the machine, right? So So most likely this is, like it said, an itinerary of his travel, right? So nothing too interesting right here. Maybe we can find some usernames, but we already have two of the usernames. He works at Goldman Sachs. That's nice. So yeah, so let's see. So if we come back, what I find peculiar is this. And looking at the hints, this could be a password, right? So obviously this is kind of a CTFE box. So you have to always take note of any weird things that you do find. And because it says QWERTY, normally that's one of the most common passwords. So this is basically your first line of the keyboard, if you guys saw that. So I'm going to just pick this up as a potential password and save it in my notes. So I'm just going to come here and let's see. So let's just create a new, and I do like to have my notes in Markdown. It helps me when I move it to either Notion or Obsidian, but you're more than welcome to keep it in a text form, right? So from NFS, we found a peculiar, so, or we can just say potential password, right? So this could be a password, and we did have the user David. So now we can quickly check because SSH is open. So now we can now see where this password, if even it's a password, right? So if we come back here, let's quickly check if the user, if we can log in to the machine as that user using that password. So because for this stream, I can just use SSH pass dash P, yeah, SSH David at, yeah, so permission is denied, right? So again, this means that maybe David does not have permissions to log into the box. So we can quickly check that by either using it as root to see if there is, if we can use log into the machine as root. I still have the ID RSA from the last one. I think I would either reset the box quickly so that this doesn't happen. But yeah, was the IDRSA key, which once you're done with the machine, you can obviously add. So I'm just going to quickly reset the box so that we don't encounter these things. So in the meanwhile, we can go back to our notes, and we can see where this password is applicable. Yeah, that hacked in a second, right? Obviously, for the streams, do look at different ways, explore that. But for that reason, it didn't get reset the way I thought. But obviously, once I reset it, it's going to get removed. So that's one of the techniques that I did want to show, that once you're done with the box, the first thing I like to do is just quickly add my own SSH key. And especially as root user, you can change up services, you can add services. So that's a good way to have persistence so that I can quickly go back on the box. Obviously, if in case there isn't an IDRSA uh, key already on the box, then that means that once you reset the box, it's gone. However, you can obviously, without resetting it, especially even in your exam or something, if you move on to another machine and you want to quickly come back to this machine, always go with an IDRSA. So if we come back here, so let's see what are the potential places we can actually uh, that the password would be applicable to, right? So if we come to our all services scan, we did see that we had SMB, so we can quickly check for SMB if it's password protected, and we can also check MySQL. So that's another place we could use the password, and then we can also revisit the HTTP, obviously, to see if that's someplace uh, it's password protected. So it's always good to not only take note of any potential passwords that you might think or any credentials that you receive, to check them against all the services that are running on the box. So just because SSH didn't work for us, that doesn't mean we should discard it. So we can take a mental note of that potential password, and we can come here and use that. So we'll just say potential password. So we checked SSH wasn't allowed. So we can say that we want to check for for pass on SMB, MySQL, which is going to be a quick test, and the web server, right? So web server. But yeah, I think the box has been reset. So yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, so I think even our mount is not supposed to work most likely. Uh, so I'm just going to umount. So that is umount. Let me just quickly see the, obviously I have other things mounted too. So let's see, we want to on a specific source, right? So it should be umount. Yeah. So now we know that if we visit this directory, it shouldn't be there. But yeah, the machine seems like it did reset. So we can quickly go back to where we were by checking for, if by mounting the share first. So it's going to be mount dash v. We don't have to use the verbose. We can just specify the type. The IP address remains the same because I configured a static IP so that I don't have to quickly grab it again and again. And that's something I would recommend. So it was Nfs Share, and the directory I want is, so now it's we have that directory, and now it should have been reset. So again, the same uh, things, but yeah, this is great. So now the box has been properly reset. So if we go back here, let me try to see if that is, it shouldn't work now, right? Because I have no clue. I reset the box. I'm not sure why it won't remove it. I might have to remove it from my, reset, revert. And that is because I normally solve most of my machines on the portal or stuff like that. So I'm not really sure why a reset did not revert the machine fully. Now that is peculiar. Let me just check that again on the options. Because all the keys that I did add, I don't have any keys in my current directory. But yeah, it's a direct priv vector. Yeah, I found a 0 day, which I'm not going to disclose. You just have to use SSH. So most likely, because I did add my key, like I said, to the authorized keys, but it should get removed once I reset the box, right? But for some reason, it's either not doing that. So now we have two options. I can continue with the same vector and go about it and then show you how I added it, or I can use a new clone. But I'm going to continue just to see if, because other things remain the same, right? So obviously that doesn't really give away the box because of the SSH, but yeah, let's continue with this. So we do know we have a password and we wanted to check for root, and it shouldn't work right there. Secondly, what we can do is we had the SMB, right? So to enumerate the SMB folders, what you can do is you can use either SMB map, and that's dash H. And so you want to move out of the NFS directory because it does slow down your machine. So I'm quickly just going to unmount it for now so that it doesn't really cause delays, and we can mount it again later. And for this, we can just visit our history to quickly see the U-mount, which is simple as this. But yeah, it looks good. So let's enumerate the SMB before we move on to the web. So like we our enum for Linux scan showed that there is a anonymous folder which we do have read only. This is more likely if you log in as anonymous user, but there's also secured and uh, your normal mountable service, right? So let's first try the anonymous one. And for that, we can use SMB client. And for that, you can basically use the syntax dash dash no password dash L log just to enumerate the shares. So this is another way to enumerate, and you have to do tac tac IP. So you can see we got the same result. So now we can just remove the dash L. This is just, again, different ways to use different tools to get this to verify your results. But yeah, so for now, I think it requires an anonymous. So we can already see there's several folders right here, but most of them are empty. So normally what I like to do is I quickly download all of these files, uh, which you can actually, so that if there are any hidden folders or something like that, we can quickly see that. But here I can see there's lots of junk and only one readme. So I'll just do mget readme.txt. And now we downloaded the readme.txt to our local machine. So I'm just going to exit out and let's just read what it says. So basically it says that internal file sharing system across SMB, yada, yada, yada. Once we migrate, it's going to be a SharePoint. And we also noticed the archival of plenty of email. So this isn't really telling us much. However, it did give us a new name, which you can see. We got several names, but obviously with CTFs, you want to see what is being repeated again and again, because that's usually where the hint is. So we had a couple of names right here, but in this note, we do see that an active user is Genevieve, and apparently they are brave. But so Genevieve is there. Again, something to note. We can keep that in the back of the mind, but we wanted to try actually the password we got if we can access the secured folder using that password. Well, before I do that, I'm just going to create an SMB folder right here to just keep things organized, right? So I'm going to move this to SMB and that's it. So in order to test if we can access, if that password and credential is good to access SMB, we can just use SMB map. And this time we can specify the name of a user. So it's going to be David. And then we can specify the password. We can quickly grab the password right here. And we specify the host. And you can see that this password was actually valid for David. We also saw another user called Ricky. So we can even check for that. However, mostly the passwords aren't really shared, but for Windows machines, I would recommend that, you test the same password for different users too, just in case. So yeah, so you can see that when we use when the password is wrong, you'll see we get the same result as anonymous. But when we use David's password, we found that we have read and write on secured. So now what I like to do is I'm just going to quickly download everything that's inside secured. So the good way to do that is you can use SMB client and you specify the IP, you specify the folder. Now you can specify the username using a capital U. And again, any of these commands, if you're ever in doubt, you can quickly just go to SMB client dash dash help. And then I can quickly just search for the, so I wanted to use username and it'll show us the method for searching the username. So the credential option. So anytime you're not sure about a command, the first thing you should check is the help. Maybe the man, or then you can even go to the internet to look for the commands, but the help command is normally, it has everything you need most of the time. So I'm just going to close that one. So it specified that we can use a credential right into the command by specifying the user. Then we specified the password with a percentage sign, and it cleared my buffer, but it's fine. So we can specify the password this way so that we don't have to type it out. But yeah, so we can even send commands to the SMB client. So what I like to do is I'm going to specify prompt off. I'm going to specify recurse on, and I'm going to specify to grab all the files that are there inside the SMB folder. And I want to save all of these files to my newly created SMB folder. So I'm just going to come back here and cd into SMB. So now it's going to save everything to that folder. So you can see that it quickly got all of these files. Now, one of the reasons I actually like to do this is because there was a time I was solving a box and there was a hidden file inside an SMB share, and I missed that. And I wasted a lot of time because I had missed a file when accessing the SMB client directly. So if you just quickly pull everything from the SMB client, that way you're likely not to miss something. So if I check for hidden files, there are not any right here, but normally you might come across hidden files. So this is what I like to do. I just grab everything off the folder. Yeah, so the password did work. We checked if the password worked from right here, right? So when we ran the SMB map, we checked if the password was valid, and it did tell us that we have read and write access. But in case the password did not, it was invalid for a user, it would have given us no access to the folder, right? So we connected to the secured folder and got everything off the box. So now if you take a look, I can quickly just cat out everything. And it sort of broke my terminal. Most likely there was a file that is not supposed to be, read out like that. But yeah, so let's see. We can also visit this in our workspace right here. So if we come over here, you'll see that we have several files right here. So the reason it got broken was there's an .so file, which again, I think there was something I was trying, didn't work, but yeah, that's an SO file right there. So if you look at David, so the first clue sort of is that they have concern over how the developers are designing the page, and they apparently use a development secret page, which most likely is the name of a directory or a page itself. So if we were doing a Ferox buster to see the directories, this is something that our word list would not have contained. So that's a good way to mask it. But yeah, but they did tell them to replace it with DevOps. So again, once we go to our web server, we can quickly check for this directory if it exists or not, right? So that's a good thing to remember. And then again, Genevieve is there. So this time it says that the IT department's infrastructure, they've deploying something and they have another IP address for us. Obviously, we'll have to change this IP address. However, uh, there is some folder or directory called Genevieve on the web server. Now again, Genevieve is sort of a name. Unless you were using a specific word list, you wouldn't have been able to get this. But yeah, we'll see that once we do the directory busting. So we'll see that they tell us that there might be some sort of CMS on the machine. So again, like I said, this is one of the reasons I like to start with either an SMB or NFS before moving to the web server, because if there's any case of it being linked, this is how it's going to work, right? So I think we have quite a lot of hints so that now we can move to the web server. So one of the ways I like to go about if I ever have a web server is have my browser open, but also my Burp Suite open. And again, this is a tool that the community edition, you're allowed to use that freely during your exam, and there's no restrictions on this. And I'll show you why I really like to have this open right here next to my browser. I think 120 is fine for you guys to see. So what I like to do is let's just first visit the page directly. So we have three things we want to look for. We want to visit the port 80, we want to visit 443, and we also want to visit port 8080. So this looks like a default page for Apache on CentOS. Now, one of the reasons I really like Burp Suite here, so I'll show you that the basic enumeration of the directories, and any time it links to any links, it's going to crawl that for us directly. So for that, you can specify the target. I think my scope doesn't have it. So what I'll do is I'll like to add the scope in case I want to browse some other resource on the internet. I don't want that to be added. So it's much more cleaner to quickly add it to your scope and limit it. That way you won't be catching additional uh, uh, traffic from additional sites. So because I had my burp suite already configured, you can use Foxy Proxy. And what you basically do is I have it. You have to, this is some, when you set up burp, you can find tutorials on this where you can quickly set this up so that all the traffic goes through burp. But yeah, so now the good thing is it already went ahead and quickly enumerated certain directories that are on the books. Obviously, any obfuscated or hidden directories like Genevieve or some other name, it won't get that for us. However, it's going to provide us with a quick sitemap of what's there on the box, right? So this will actually use this to quickly check if there's any difference on port 443 and 8080, right? So now I can just use, I can come here and specify this. So I'm just going to use advanced. Now I like to check even the certificates just to see if there is any name. So usually if you're doing a box and there's a DNS name that is assigned, and that would come in handy when you want to enumerate for virtual hosts. This is where you want to quickly check the certificate and see if there's a DNS name assigned. But on this box, there's just localhost. It's not really that helpful for us. But yeah, so we're going to accept and continue. So on the face of it, it does seem like it's running the same thing, but we can quickly check for that. So I'm just going to come here, add to my scope. So now if I refresh this, you can see a second one got added. And it seems like it's using the same thing just on port like 443. So we can revisit this, but let's also check 8080 and then we can see if there's some difference on that port. Okay, so this one obviously it's different. And if we revisit our Nmap scan, we can see that this one indeed had your robots.txt, HTTP robots.txt. So we can quickly even check for those, right? So we can come back here and I'll quickly add this to my scope. And now when I refresh it, so this time it didn't really populate it for us. This happens especially if there's no direct way of finding any directories behind, if there are no general directories or any links in the source code. So if I come to and check out the source code, you'll see that it doesn't really link anywhere else. So that's one of the ways Burp Suite actually uses the spider function, but that's fine. So the first thing we want to check for is that HTTP robots.txt, right? So now, because we gave it a valid parameter, it was able to scan certain directories for us. So this is a good way to go about it. And it says, oh, the page is not found. Let me just remove HTTP. Okay, so these are the directories that are disallowed. So we can quickly check all of them. So what I can do is Hmm. Obviously, so with CGI bin, I don't think there's directory listing directly allowed. So we'll have to either find another file that exists after this. So for that, we can either use wfuzz and try a certain directory busting. However, we also have that Genevieve directory, which I think seems more interesting here. So I'm quickly just gonna go over these things. So this is one of the ways you can prioritize your time, especially if you obviously you want to hit up everything. However, you can keep that as something. So okay, fine. So this is basically uh, a troll. So the box is trying to tell us to do something else, right? So what I meant was that basically this is a potential vector I would like to revisit once I've seen everything else and I'm stuck. So okay, fine. This makes sense. It's forbidden, and let's just try public. So the public actually uh, gave us a lot of things, right? You can see it quickly got populated. And this is actually one of the reasons it's using HTTP proxy in most of the times, because the box is not directly connected to the internet. What they do is they use a HTTP proxy to get resources from the web. So that's, I've seen that play out with other machines that I've come across. But this mainly seems like they're just trying to troll us, right? And we can see that we didn't really get any populated things. So in public, there's basically JavaScript files, and that's basically it. So we can quickly look at the source code to see if there's anything else that's going on, and doesn't seem like it. So it seems like it's a tool, but again, we can revisit this in case we are stuck. So let's just come back to our notes. So there was genevieve.txt, which specified a Genevieve directory, but it also specified DevOps. So let's quickly look if there's something right here. So most likely they changed it out. Also, it did say port. So I think we were looking at the right one. Yeah. So development port. Seems like they followed up on that and removed that. But let's check out this one. So in the hints, it did say that it might be on, it did not specify the port. So most likely it's on port 80. So we did check it on port 8080, but we'll have to quickly just move this and check it on the main web server. And we can see that indeed there is something, a directory. So you can see that right now we didn't even use any of the brute forcing ways to find these directories. However, we can quickly just show that to you guys too. So normally some boxes do require you to directory bus, but not, but in the lab machines, or especially the exam machines, it's more likely than not that you'll have to use certain hints to find out something that uh, it can't just be found by brute forcing, because brute forcing doesn't really take much effort on the user's part. So we're not going to be handing out points for just brute forcing or cracking password, like brute forcing passwords or stuff like that. So more likely than not that there's some sort of a hint that you have to use to enumerate everything. So I like to use Ferox Buster for this, which I can show you guys. So just the command quickly. It's Ferox Buster. You specify the URL, and then you can give the extensions. We know that we want to look for PHP, so we're going to give that. And then you can specify your word list. Normally, I like to go with Raft word list, and that is configured by default if you just run the command Feroxbuster and the HTTP. So let's just see that. So Feroxbuster. And then other thing I like about this tool is that it recursively scans your directories. That means that if it finds a directory, it's gonna then run this whole word list on that directory, and that way it goes down the chain, right? So for our initial scan, I'm actually not gonna be using the recursiveness just to save time, and I'm just going to specify with n. That means that non-recursive. So it seems like this box was made for us to, have a lot of trolling and rabbit holes. As you can see, there's literally directories 19752. There's contacts us. So most likely the creator of this machine really wanted to waste people's time and give a lot of rabbit holes, right? So if you just run the scan, and I didn't specify the n do not do it recursively. This would have taken a long time to finish. And then in the end, you won't have anything juicy, because if you check you won't find the Genevieve directory by just doing a simple Ferox scan. However, I do see uploads. So maybe that's something we can quickly check. Oh, so there is files right here. External, internal quarantine. Now, if this was linked to an SMB folder, that would have made things interesting, right? So that meant we could have controlled it. However, I think the department folder is something that we saw on the NFS share, right? Now, so with this one is, let's quickly check our NFS share if to see if we can upload something on our NFS that gets shown on the web server. But the development was actually, if I remember correctly, it wasn't, it was a file, not a folder. But we can quickly just, but yeah, so it doesn't really match anything that we find over here. But most likely it's more rabbit holes. But yeah, that would be something we would quickly want to check if it's something matches, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So I think our best bet right now is to go with this Genevieve. Now, the first thing you can do, again, using brute forcing, I'm just going to move this burp suite to another folder, to another screen. So the first thing that normally people like to do the moment they find a web is just like quickly brute force the directories. But most of the time, you can actually just find what you're looking for by just visiting the site. So the first thing I like to do, I'm just going to come here. I'm going to open all of these in a new tab to see if there's something. Okay, so there's another troll right here, but that's fine. What about, so there is a kappa CMS right here. So again, the first thing you want to do is click on everything you see in a web server, because that's going to help you. Secondly, you want to look at the source code. And if you have burp running in the background, the way I did, it's going to map all of these images and all these links directly for you. So you don't really have to even rely on directory busting right off the bat. Obviously, in case you get stuck, there's nothing there, you can run the scan and go back. Right now, because we're connected on the LAN, all of these scans are taking like a few minutes to complete. However, in the exam environment or the lab environment, that's not the case. Your scans take a lot longer to complete. So you have to make the most of your time right there, that you have to see that, is it worth it? Can I do this scan in the background while I do something else? And normally what happens is if you're running a heavy scan like Ferox Buster, the web page is going to start to get stuck. So it's not going to be like, oh, I'm just going to run a scan while also enumerating the web server myself, because then it won't load for you. So you have to, this is a trade-off you need to make. If you want to run really heavy scans, then your connection to the host itself will be compromised that way. But I saw that kappa SMS is CMS is right there. So what are the few things we can try? You can already see that I tried the SQL injection so many times that that's literally one of the suggestions that comes up. And we do know that MySQL is there on the box, right? So that's the first thing I'm going to try. We actually, the first thing we should try is connecting to MySQL and seeing if we can actually connect. And I think the command for that, I can quickly just grab it from my history. But yeah, so it should be. So first, let's just try with the user root, because that's normally how MySQL works. And we can see that it doesn't allow from any external hosts, which is not which is a common theme. You'll see that in order to access MySQL, it normally is only allowed to be accessed through local hosts. So you need to get a shell on the box in order to enumerate and in order to use it. But yeah, so because MySQL is there on the box, what we can try is an SQL injection. bypass, SQL auth bypass. And for that, uh, we want to make a statement that results into a true, which results into true that tricks uh, the SQL client to think that because that's how it checks for passwords. It's going to check if one value compares to the other value for the hash or the password, and if it comes true, it lets you pass. So this is a way you can quickly test for SQL injection. So what we can do is the reason you have to be careful with the quotes is because it will also include two quotes itself. So with the first quote, I broke out of the query because I want or to be not read as a string, but as an object itself, as a command, right? So anything I want the SQL client, the server to actually read as a command, I want it to be outside quotes. So when the query starts, the first quotation that's given by the SQL server that gets deleted with this quote. So or will be read as a command. Then I'm going to give one. You can give two, three, whatever, as long as it is equal to one another. So this is going to result in true. And because we used or, it doesn't really matter if this is correct or not. It's still going to come out to be true. And then we can just give this command to cancel anything else the SQL server might add inside the query. You can even use a pound sign or this. It works for one of them might work. So this just ensures that if the SQL server is adding anything after our query, that it doesn't get resolved. So I'm just going to pick that up and just paste it right here. And it did not work, right? So what we can do is quickly try a few passwords. So one thing I do not like, and that's something I even recommend to students, is that even if you see a login prompt, please don't just slap in a big word list like rockq and then just hope for the best. Because again, that's not something we want to test. We're not testing for directly. Obviously, you'll find cases of where you have to brute force it, but as you advance in the field and as you come across more challenges, you'll see that such techniques aren't really tested for, oh, if you could just simply slap in a rockq.txt and just brute force it. It's generally there's some other thing, a hint from another box or something like that that helps you bypass it. So what I'd like to generally do, if I tried the SQL injection, that didn't work. So I'm quickly going to try a few passwords. So the first one is going to be admin, didn't work. I'm going to try admin password, didn't work. Next, I'd like to use if there are any um, users that I found on the box. For that, even there are two combinations possibly, right? So it's the name and the name again. So David didn't work. You can try David password, but normally with the boxes I've seen, it's the same username uh, and the password. So the other one was Ricky. Again, no luck. So at this point, I'm actually going to see if there were any credentials that we found. And we did find the credentials for David. So that's what I'm going to try next. And generally, if nothing else works, that's when I try to slap in a word list. But again, most of the boxes aren't really configured for you to just start and throwing in a word list and just hoping for the best. So let's come back to our notes and let's see if this password works. Because it didn't work. It worked for the Smb share, but after that, it didn't work for the SSH, didn't work for MySQL. So let's see if it works here. And it didn't work. So now, normally at this point, you're like, what should I do next? One of the things that we do try to teach, especially in the course, is always looking for public exploits for any of the services that you come across, because that's one of the major things that you're tested in the Pen 200 course, is that you don't have to write exploits for yourself. However, you are expected to quickly enumerate or find any services that are running on the machine, find appropriate versions, because sometimes there might be several vulnerabilities that might exist for a version, and then see if there are any public exploits available. So I'm going to search for Kappa CMS and see if there are any exploits available. So for that, you can either use search exploit or you can use exploit DB. they generally have the same results. In case one of them doesn't give you the results, I'd say double check on exploit DB. But yeah, so it's the syntax for that is search exploit. Oh, because I have the Nfs share mounted, you can see there was a delay, right? So I'm just gonna unmount that real quick, or I can move it to an other folder so that it doesn't really hinder with this, but I usually just like to unmount it so that it doesn't really bother me. So yeah, so now I'm just gonna, let's also create a folder called exploits, so that if in case we have any exploits we find, so we can save them right here. So search exploit, and then we can just give the name. So we know it's kappa CMS. Now you can either search the whole name, and in case you don't get any hits, I'd recommend breaking the words up and then finding it, searching for them. But you can see that this CMS has only one exploit there, and it looks like it's a local or remote file inclusion. Now, in case there were several exploits, I would have recommended to go find the version of Kappa that's running, and to see if you can identify the version specifically and then find an exploit related to that. But in this case, there's only one exploit here. We can quickly try if it works or not. And it seems like it's a text file, so there's some information about the exploit itself that we can test. So for search exploit, you can simply save the exploit by using the -m flag and giving the number, and you can see that it was saved. And there's also an exploit DB link, which is makes sense because obviously it's both of them are linked. So let's just see what this file has. So now we can come back to our workspace. Let's go to exploits and take a look at what this exploit has. So there looks like there's a couple of things that Kappa CMS was vulnerable to. So it shows that we can have PHP code injection. So because there's PHP code injection, they use that to uh, either use it as an LFI or RFI. So because of this include function, and this is one of the main reasons if there's a vulnerability that it would exist. So it says that the attacker might include local or remote PHP files or read non-PHP files with this vulnerability. And let me just do a word wrap. And then whatever will be included into the current file, the PHP code in this file will be evaluated. Non-PHP code will be embedded to the output. So why is that important that we can read several sort of PHP files? Because obviously in case you can see it right here. So if we're just including a normal etc password file, we can simply access that using this URL config. However, if you want to look at some configuration file, which is in PHP, if we access that, it's going to get rendered by the PHP web server itself. So that's why they're using a wrapper. So they're using a PHP wrapper where they convert the data into base 64 so that we can actually read the output. So let's just see what the examples they gave and try those. So now another thing that you need to remember, if we let's take a look at the URL. So they say target kappa alerts, but if we come here to our web server, we can see the address is actually a bit different. So this is again something that they do change up a little bit in the lab machines or the exam, so that it's simply not yours. You just pick it up, copy paste, and you get the answer. You still have to apply it. You have to modify the exploit a bit and then use it, right? So let's see if this exists. Also, I would like to get my burp suite back so that we can capture the requests and play around with it in case it works, right? So let's come back to the exploit. Just going to pick this up from alerts. Yeah, so this should work. And I'm just going to capture it. So then come to proxy, turn it on. And I'm going to send this to a repeater and also forward the request. And you can see that this version was indeed vulnerable to the LFI. And right off the back, we can see a few users. But this isn't really going to help us too much, right? Because it's simply an LFI. You can read files from the machine, but your end goal is always to get RCE, which will lead you to getting a reverse shell back, right? So that's your end goal always. So an LFI isn't really that helpful unless you can somehow trigger some code, which normally is through log poisoning, so Apache log poisoning, or even mail poisoning. So if there was a mail server running, I would have tried to somehow get the to add code inside the mail logs and then visit those mail logs through the web server, and that would execute code. However, in this case, that doesn't seem to be the case. So let's just see if the other vulnerabilities also work. So they said that they showed us that the LFI is there. Next, obviously, is the RFI. But before we move to the RFI, let's also check if there's any configuration files that we can use. So I'm also going to grab this. And in my repeater, what I can do is I'm simply going to slap that in right here. Yeah, I made some mistake right there, but I'll just copy it again and the whole and try that again. Yeah, this seems more like it. And you can see that indeed there is a configuration file and this exists. So for this, I can, because I'm using burp, I can literally just use the decoder right here to I can send it to decoder. So I'll just come here and send the request to decoder. And we can already see that we do have some password and configuration for the MySQL that's running, right? But obviously we'll have to get on the box to try this out. So I'm just going to copy all of this and save it to my notes. And we can add a portion, so it's going to be after web services, because you want to keep the flow of the way you solve the machine. So we check for NFS, then we move to SMB, then web services, and then MySQL, which you can populate later, but obviously you want to have some, maintain some flow. So we can say uh, not allowed to connect. So the reason I gave these headers is that if I ever paste them inside another markdown, it's going to get highlighted. So we have a potential password which we can try once we have access to the machine, but this doesn't really help us. So the last thing we saw was that we also do have a remote RFI. So we can see if we can access our own machine and then execute most likely a PHP code so that we can get a reverse shell or something like that back. So this is where I actually had a few things that I wanted to show to you guys, but yeah, let's come here. So I'm just gonna use the same. So I don't really need the web server anymore, right? So I'm just gonna work directly out of my burp suite. And the nice thing is that you can actually, instead of manually editing all of these things, you can just come here, come to your query attributes, and you can actually change them from there. So let's see, we're in inspector, right? So we want to go to repeater again. Yeah, so if you see the request attributes, you can actually edit everything here, and just to make sure that you don't get things wrong, right? So we just wanted the RFI, so that would actually give us alert.config, and yeah, this is most likely how it's going to be. So not really sure. Yeah, it's right here. So if we come here, you can edit things from here, but you can even edit things from there. It doesn't really uh, change much, just some things I want to show. So okay, so for testing, I'll quickly give my own IP address, which is 183. You'll have to check which one. You'll have to check your own IP address, and then what we can do, we can specify test and apply changes. It changed the request here. So let's come over here, and I'm going to create a www directory, and also going to rename the window www. So I have a function already set, serve, which serves Python, creates a Python server and serves everything from this directory. I'm just going to split it up. And now I'm just going to try to send that request and see if we get a hit. And you can see that RFI is indeed present on the box. So that's great. So now what we can do, we can simply use a PHP reverse shell to get a shell on the box. Now this is some here, which is something that I actually would suggest. Like normally what you'll do is you'll either create a new, let's say, let's create a new cmd.php, right? A simple one. So for this, the code would be actually, you just do a system. So what you can do is, let's see. Yeah. So what you'll do is you'll just specify a PHP and system, and then normally what people like to do is specify. So anything you specify inside this. So if you want to have a dynamic one, you can just say get and then a parameter like that. However, our end goal is to get a reverse shell. So what I like to do, because obviously PHP reverse shells, because you're going to be relying on the web server, and in case that goes down, your shell is going to die. So what I like to do is, firstly, if I have code execution through PHP, I'd rather simply get the shell directly through this code. Now obviously you could say that, oh, why don't you just include a cmd and then try it by capturing the request and going that way. There usually what happens is this, all you either URL encodes your commands, otherwise the special characters always cause issues for me. So if I try to get the cmd execution through the web browser, the special characters, this most of the cases they never behave. So instead what I like to do is I'm simply gonna specify the commands that I want to run. And again, you could specify a bash shell, but what I go with is I'm gonna curl, make a second request to my own server 183, and then I have this rev.sh. That's actually what I wanted to show to you guys. So if I come here and I'm gonna copy tools rev.sh, and let's take a look at what rev.sh includes. So you see, this is a script I made. Actually, you can find it on the internet too. So it contains 4 different sort of reverse shells that are most common. So normally if you wanted to get a reverse shell using, let's say, netcat, your command would have been this one, right? And then you can pipe it directly to sh to execute this. But using this script, you can actually on the fly test for different sort of, so some cases when you get on a box and netcat might not be present, sh might not be present. So what this allows is on the fly, you can switch out which command you would like to use and then pipe it to, so if I pipe this whole command to netcat, it's going to run this. If I pipe it to Perl, it's going to run this. So this is a really great, like this really helps me out using boxes, and I can sometimes bypass restrictions. So sometimes what they'll do is they'll restrict certain, maybe they'll remove netcat, they won't include it in the path to just like hinder students from getting a shell and wasting their time. So this is one of the ways you can quickly bypass it. I'm just going to come here and I'm going to include my own directory. So I'm going to include my own IP address. And 443 is generally the best port to go with, because in case things are blocked, 443 I know is open on this box. So unless there are more firewall rules there, it's a safe port to try. So if I save this, so now what I'm doing actually is I'm specifying a command.php and I'm telling it to curl rev.sh from my machine and pipe it to sh. So what's going to happen is now if I, let's see, we have it right here. So for you guys, so you guys can see, I'm going to start a reverse shell. I have a wrapper for netcat. Basically, it does rl wrap and creates a netcat listener on this. And we're already serving those files. So if I come here and I tell it to get cmd.php, it should get that for file, and then it should have made a curl request. But there's probably a mistake with my PHP code. So let me just quickly check that. Oh yeah, I didn't close it, right? So it did not write PHP code properly. Let's see what else is the issue. So we have PHP CMD. Now we want to make a curl request. We want to pipe it, and we want to close the bracket. Yeah, this should work now. And you'll see we returned a shell. So obviously you could have used a PHP reverse shell and gotten a shell back, but then obviously a PHP shell isn't as good as a bash shell. So you want to use this. But again, now one of the main things when you're doing a box, if I kill this shell, I've been kicked out, right? So you can actually have an infinite shells, and you can get back on the box whenever you want, and by simply using this following line. So what I'll do is, obviously it's a bit I wouldn't say destructive, but what we can do is we can create a while loop. So I'll just say while true, do curl, and then I'll just come here and say done. So now what's going to happen is if I create another reverse shell, so now if I come here, and what I can do is I can quickly just save this as a curl command, so I don't have to keep on coming back. But if I come back here, and let me just split this terminal, and yeah, so the curl command that's going to give us a shell is this one, right? And you can see that we got a shell back. But now if, let's say, I killed my shell, and if I try rev again, I'm going to get a shell back. So this is going to give me infinite shells. Even though if I'm doing the box and I accidentally kill my shell, I can just quickly get back on it anytime I want, right? So this is a good way to maintaining access, like having persistence on the box without even getting on the box. However, make sure to go, once you're done exploiting the machine, to go back and kill this process. So if you can come, I'll show you. If I do a psaux grep and let's say curl, so you'll see that there is a process running in the background, and it's going to keep on running. You'll have to kill this once you're done. But this, I really find it a nice way to maintain persistence, especially during the exam. Accidentally I kill my shell, and so this is a good way. So I'm just going to get back on the box one last time, and you'll see that I have it configured to quickly give me the commands to get a stable shell. Obviously, we're already in so if I say which shell are we in, echo. Oh, so we're in sbin no login, right? So let me just see which Python. We have user bin Python on this. So I'm just going to grab this, and we have a bash shell now. So this is just something that really helps us get on the box. So now we actually got access on the box. So what's the first thing we do? So normally what I like to do is the moment I get on the box, I like to check for the users. So we can do that, but all of these things, linps will do that for us. So I'm just going to create an other reverse shell, which I'll use to manually enumerate things on. Obviously, I won't be able to get a shell on this one without killing this one, but I can use this site, which I recommend most of you should have bookmarked. So rev shells, and I think I have repeater on, so I'm just gonna intercept off. And this site is really great because all you have to do is gonna specify your IP address. and specify a port. We tried 443. I think we can even try 9001 because we'll know if we're allowed to use this or not. But generally using 9001 directly without getting access is not a good way in case the ports are blocked. And I know Python is on the book, so let me just try come here and use a Python script. This one's good. I like this one because it's going to give us that. We can specify the shell type. So bin bash, and the port is 9001. So I'm just going to kill this rev. And now if I come here and I don't want my terminal to get stuck while I have another shell, so I'm just going to use run that in the background. But you can see that the port is refused, most likely that 9001 isn't allowed. So we can next we can try either 8080. Oh, that's already in use. What's another port that we can try? Maybe 139. Oh, I can see why the issue is there because I actually used the IP address not for my machine. I used it for the target. But yeah, those are some things you can just change out. So this should work right off the box. So now we can just specify and run it in the background, and you can see we have another shell right here. So we can use this shell to enumerate things manually, and we can use one shell to run linps. Now for linps, again, there's two ways to go about it. You can either just save the file. So you have to make sure that when you're saving any files on the machine, you save it to dev.shm, which is normally the writable folder. But there's another good way to not even touch the directory disk. You can just live off the disk, which I'll show you how to do that. So if we come here, I'm just going to locate linps real quick. I have several ones. I think I'll just use this one. Actually, this one is the last one I tested. So, wow. Uh, So now if I want to run linps without saving it to disk, I can just use what I tried last time is and curl it directly into sh. So now I didn't touch this disk and I just ran linps directly. So while this runs, let's visit that root squash that I mentioned, NFS root squash that was there. Before that, you can go grab the flags. I normally like to get all the bounties in the end because but you do need to get the flags. I normally get root, then I go get the flags, but you can simply do find dash name should be local.txt. I think so, or proof, and then type it's a file, and then we just want to so it's saved in the current directory. So if you can just do local, and obviously we had root, but I'm more interested in the linps output. So I'm just going to bring this into focus and let's see. So while this runs, we can actually just use tmux and go up while that ran. So the first thing we can check for that I like to check for, obviously this has the pseudo vulnerability that's there. This is something I would recommend you guys go check it out because obviously this wasn't the intended path. But yeah, you can uh, try this vulnerability out for yourself. Uh, then the writable folders thing that I mentioned, you can actually find that in the start of linps. So it does tell you that in case you want to have a place where you want to save any files, dev.shm is the best place to start. And that's also given in the linps output. So that's normally the first thing I just run the moment I get on the box. Again, it has Linux exploit suggester. Now, what we're looking for basically, the first thing you want to check for is if there's any highlighted yellow with red on it. That means that it's the first place you should start. But in our case, I was actually interested in checking for that no root squash, right? To see if that NFS has been configured uh, improperly. That would make it vulnerable. So, so we can already see a vector right here. So while this runs, there's also another way to actually check for that. And I think it's if you cat out it's etc nfs. Yeah, there's no such file. Maybe I got the here you can see. So that's what I thought. And so this is one thing that it's vulnerable to. So they did not select the option for they did not disable no root squash. So basically what this means is that I can create any I can create an executable on my end and upload it as root on the nfs share, and it will preserve its sticky suid. So it will, and then I can execute things as root on the target machine. Now, in order to do this, one thing that normally you'll encounter is that because you're on Kali, when you try to simply use copy paste your sh, your bin bash, it gives errors because obviously there are different sort of distributions and everything. So it's much better to simply compile your own using C code. Now you can either find that template online or it's quite simple to create, which I'll just show. And also we saw that there is a vulnerability for copy paste. Yeah. Another thing we can see that copy paste is it showed that it has a sudo and suid highlighted on this. So the most likely means that we can run copy paste either as sudo or we can use it run it with the permissions of root. So this copy paste one I'll revisit later. I really like the no root squash because it's more applicable. So let's try to exploit that. So what we want to do, we want to go to the nfs directory. Obviously it's not mounted yet, so I'm just gonna do the mount one last time, hopefully. And nfs, yeah, so it's mounted. Now, if I want to become root, so I can just quickly come here and visit that. So it's gonna be cd. Yeah. So now what we want to do, we want to create, obviously we're not going to create a shell, but the vulnerability that exists is that we can upload any executable with the permissions set. So what we want to do, we want to create an executable that basically grabs the which executes the bin bash on the target machine using a certain SUID set that will allow us to have to transfer the permissions, right? So for that, we can simply we'll just create, you might have noticed I tried that before too. And so we can just use pawn.c. Now we'll have to include some headers. I've seen some places where people don't include it, but it's better to include it. So we're just going to use stdio. It's a simple header. Again, you can find this online too. I'll even post it, like in case you ever encounter this, you can simply create it. So I'm just going to use an int main. Let's create a void. And now we can start specifying what we would like. So let's set the group ID so that we can transfer everything, like all the permissions, and we're going to set that as 0. Then also set the UID as 0. We're not really creating anything. We're just gonna tell this executable to grab bin bash and to actually execute bin bash command with certain permissions. if we had the ability to directly execute this on the box, we could have, but this vulnerability basically allows us to execute a executable using those permissions. So we can just create another one that runs that command for us. And in the end, we can just return 0, and that should be it. Yeah, so all we'll have to do now is going to compile it. So for that, we can use GCC, and we can specify your type and output it as pawn. Let's see, and looks like it got created. Now I'm also going to just copy paste my bin bash and show it to you guys if that works or not, right? So now I'm just going to exit. Now let's go back to our target. So now if we go to our mount, which was at var nfs share ls, so you can see that we have our pawn and also our bash. So let's just quickly do ls la, and we can see that it's owned by root, but the permissions are everyone globally, anyone can execute. And so it holds the proper permissions in order for us to execute. Similarly, our bash also has it. But if we try to, let's see if my bash works. So you'll see simply copy pasting bash from my local machine onto the box gives us errors because obviously it's a different distribution. There's other libraries that weren't included. However, making a simple one like pawn should give us okay, so even the spawn didn't work for some reason. Let's see what the issue was. Did I miss int bin bash? Should have maybe tried the bin sh. So in both cases, let me revisit why it did not. Let's go back to a VS Code because obviously even using that works. So let's come here. So we included that bin bash. Set UID, set GID. Yeah, I think the dash p, we can that's no problem. We can now once you're stuck, you can always refer to some notes, right? So one of the good places, I'm even going to share this site with you guys. This is a good one that I generally use. Let me just grab the so this is a cheat sheet which normally even to other students I give. This is a really well-made cheat sheet, and you should have it linked. It has most of the commands right there. So anytime I'm stuck, especially with the OSCP, I can either refer back to my notes, but my notes usually just contain this one. So what I can come here, I can just search NFS, and you'll see that most of the things are already included, all the exploits and everything. So for this, he didn't use. So okay, so he basically has a bit different, but we can just try his method. So I'm not going to name it pawn. I'm going to name it some, and let's say it's siddicky.c. I want to become root. So maybe that was an issue. I'm not really sure, but we can just now. Well, let's see what he says. So now it's basically, oh, okay, I understood what the issue was. So we didn't specify the chmod. Yeah, that's something I forgot to specify who to execute it as. So yeah, that's obviously you learn something, you do miss something. But yeah, so now if we give these permissions, they should be transferred. So the one we created too should also work. So now if I come here and I use pawn, you can see I got root user. So that was one way. That was one way to exploit the NFS share vulnerability. But let's also take a look at I know we're a bit gone, a bit above time, but we can quickly exploit the copy paste vulnerability. That's simply from GTFO bins. So anytime you can see any of these, so let's take a look back at our linpiece output. It should be saved. Yeah, so if we come up, so let's see, we exploited the NFS one, but we also had a couple of other ones too. So again, if you're ever stuck, we can also revisit the MySQL. So that's one thing I would actually recommend. If you guys revisit the box, try to use the MySQL one to see if there's a vulnerability you can exploit over there. So there's also GCC on the box. This means that in case you were unable to compile it on your box, there's GCC right here. So you can even compile the same code on using on this box just to make sure that it gets there's no compatibility issues. But let's take a look at the CP. So yeah, so it also has that we can execute user bin copy paste as the user, so as with higher privileges. So in order to exploit that, we would come to GTFO bins, and we can simply search for copy paste, right? So this is a great resource in case you haven't checked it out. Every time you find certain permissions regarding if you can execute something as sudo, you want to quickly check for that. If you have SUID, so this one looked like we were able to run it as sudo, which we can also test, right? We never tested that actually. So sudo-l, and yeah. So we wanted the password, which we actually don't really have. Let's quickly check if that password works. Otherwise, we'll have to check how linpiece was able to determine that that was vulnerable. So yeah, that's not the password. So most likely it's a SUID, which we can refer back now. Now this is one of the places I can just kill my shell and then I can get back on it. It's just okay. It seems like okay. So this one is the shell where I had. So this one seems like the yeah, the reason I couldn't get back on it is because this is the one that had our second shell on. So let's see how. Yeah, the SUID is set for copy paste, but I just wanted to make sure how linpiece was able to find that out, right? So let me just search that. So again, tmux, no matter, this is one of the main reasons I like that. So it shows that Linux privilege, sudo, and SUID. But I'm not sure how it was able to determine that. Oh yeah, okay. I can check that quickly again using this one. So if we come to the cheat sheet I shared, if we come back, let me just share it in the chat with you guys too, so you can save it and take a look at yourself. So if you come over here, even the permissions one, obviously I can now that I also know these commands, like I can run that, but now that I've shown this, you can find all of these things in this one, which I really like. So if we come up and you can find useful, and I think I did see it here, otherwise you can yeah. So if we let's just list everything that has the SUID, right? So we're just going to pick this up, and you can see that that is the case. So we can run CP as with higher privileges. So now again, there's two ways to go about it. There's a really destructive way and there's a normal way. I think in the really destructive way, what we can do is we can copy paste a bin bash and replace CP as bin bash and rename it and then just run. CP with higher privileges, and it should work. However, we shouldn't do that. We should check. We can create a new password and go that route. Now, again, I would recommend if you guys want to do that yourself, that's something you guys can try. And I basically wanted to show this vulnerability. Again, this NFS vulnerability, you have to make sure that you configure your NFS properly, because this is one of the ways this privilege escalation that can be done. So the rev.sh, don't worry, I'll share that in the pen 200 Wireside chat. So basically it's XCT's GitHub. So this is another great resource you should guys check out. And I think he hasn't shared this one, so I'll just share that one. I think he created his own shell. So yeah, I think he has his own shell now. That one I'll just share in the chat, which has several different sort of shells. So we can even test that if you guys want to check that out quickly. So if we come back to our burp suite, actually we have to change our CMD. Let me just kill the, so if I can just do ox, so we're going to kill that process with kill -9, and now it won't keep on making requests, right? So one thing that before we test this out, obviously you want to, so now if you come back to our cmd.php, if you guys want to check out another one, now if we pipe this to Python, it should give us a Python shell. That's basically how that works, right? So basically if you pipe it to Perl, it's going to give you something, pipe it to Python. So let's just change our cmd php. Gonna save that, come back to my terminal. It's getting a bit messed up, but yeah, so let's just try 443. And I'm going to make the same curl request. It made a request, but it did not work. Let's see if we have to include the whole. Let me try the netcat though. Bin sh, what seems to be the issue? I think 443. The looping one really does take a toll on it. So that's one of the reasons. I think, yeah, so we're here. Let's quickly try that, why it's giving us issues. So 192. Okay, yeah, so there is a syntax issue that it seems like it. Not really sure. I think we have to include the full path. So that's one of the issues that you might run into, that you will have to specify the full path for these in order for it to run. For the rev ASH, actually, it's I shared that before too. It's basically, let me just, and we have our custom. So for the rev, it's basically a custom function that takes the argument for port, and then I just added some normal text, and it's basically your RL wrap, and it creates that. And this for the HTTP Python server, it was a similar thing. Normally you can even use updog, but I like to use with updog. I've seen sometimes when you specify the IP and you're connected to a VPN, it doesn't serve on the right one. So, but Python server, it actually has the option to specify the directory without even changing to it. So I just create, you can simply use serve, specify the port and the directory you want to serve it as. But yeah, I think let me just hop back on the box and see, show you how to get the proof, and I'll see why the other script is giving issues. But hopefully, I'll post it in Fireside Chat because I think I've gone quite long on this stream. But yeah, so if we come back on the box, now this is something what you can do is what basically I did was not really sure why it didn't reset. I'll have to look into it. So basically, in case you don't have an SSH folder made, you can, because I know there's SSH is running on the host, right? So you can come here and you can simply copy paste your public IDRSA pub. So if I was going to come here, for boxes, I would recommend that you create a new key, SSH key for a new one. But in case you just want to use your own one, you can just cat out your current one, ID rsa.pub, and basically you can just copy paste this key and add it to your authorized hosts. In case this file doesn't exist, you can just create it. And if I can, that's one of the reasons I was able to quickly just get like on the box is because I added my own key right here, which should have been removed once I reset the box, but it didn't. So normally once you're done, once you have everything you need, there's three things you need to get your proof.local screenshots. So for that, you want to run it twice. So the first thing you want to prove is that this terminal does belong to the target IP. So normally what people you can use is you can use who am I, you can show the user, you can then show the host name. Again, this isn't required, but it's good practice. You can show the host name, but ipconfig again, and if it's a Linux box, usually I think it's if config, or if it's a new one, it's going to be this one. So you want to show the IP address as proof of the box. So this is the IP address we want. And then you want to cat out the local.txt and the proof.txt. Now, even when you're using a root, when you're using your root shell to get all the proofs, generally you want to take two screenshots because they come in separate portions of your report. So this was our local one, and in case, and then you can run the same steps and get a root.txt one. So yeah, hopefully you guys had it was a nice learning experience. Again, I apologize. This was my first time actually deploying a machine on my local host and running it. Usually I just do all the machines either on proving grounds or other platforms. So I wasn't really sure why it did not reset, but yeah, it didn't really give anything else away. Other than that, I recommend revisiting this box and trying the other CVE, which you could see because the box is a bit old. So you saw that it was vulnerable to other CVEs too. Another thing that I actually wanted to do was to brute force that cgi.bin to see if it's vulnerable to shell shock. So there's actually a lot of avenues that I wanted to go in, but because of time constraint, we couldn't do that. So I would recommend checking out the CP, creating a user for CP. You can simply copy paste, or you can use that path yourself. Check out the shell shock, and finally do check out that sudo baron exploit to see if it's vulnerable to that. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. The next stream, Siren's going to be there, so hopefully you guys are going to enjoy that more. And as always, do visit our you can visit our website to see upcoming events. We do have podcasts, and if you guys are aware of Dark, he's also these days there. Tijan Al has his podcast. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed and have a great day. Bye bye.